In this conversations, we generally interact with lawyers about their personal journey as lawyer outside their workspaces and interact with them on a personal level. Today, I'm very privileged and honored to have a very, very dear friend of mine, Ms. Nimra Samin Alvi, among us to interact with all of us and share her experiences and journey to be a lawyer. She started off her career as a software developer, and then she did her 3-year LLB course from Jindal Global Law School. And now she has been practicing at Shardul Amarchand Mangal Das for the last 4 years. Um, I have seen Nimra grow as a lawyer since Jindal. We were batchmates, and I have known her, I have seen her grow as a lawyer, and that's why it's absolutely amazing to have her here today. Welcome, Nimra.
Thank you.
So, just to give a heads up about the conversation that we are going to have, just a little intro. So it's going to be a 45 minutes session. The duration is 45 minutes. The first half hour, our student representative, Mr. Karthik Pathak, he'll be doing an interaction with you. I'm sure Karthik has a lot of questions. And then the rest 15 minutes will be Q&A.
Sure.
All right, over to you, Karthik.
So good morning everyone and good morning ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you on Law A Personal Journey. So ma'am, I'm Karthik Pathak, second year BLLB student and I'll be the moderator of the session. So Urmi ma'am already told you the format. So I guess we'll just start the questions. Ma'am, I was reading your CV and it intrigued me that you are a professional software developer. So what made you apply to law school and how did you take a drastic change in career? Like what was the rationale behind the change?
So I think I became a software developer by default, as is the situation of our education system, school education, higher education system. At that point of time, you're not really explained the kind of choices that you have. So you sort of go for whatever is the safest option that is in front of you. For me, that was math science, keeping all my options open. Then it was engineering. Um, I think I ventured into the field to ensure that I did not want to do this. It was more of a elimination procedure than a choice. So I did my engineering. I got a job so that I can confidently quit, because having got that, I know that I'm capable. Then during the job, I realized, I mean, the kind of environment any job offers, and that I am not really suitable for the typical employer-employee format. I can't really. That's what I felt, that every day I'll go switch on my computer and type few codes and come back, and that's not the life I want. So therefore, I quit. I still didn't know I wanted to do law. Law, I think, just happened because I felt that I need something empowering in my life, and the ability to do things. And by that, I just don't mean helping people or some social cause, but independently also as an individual. Law is something that makes you feel empowering as a person. So therefore, I think I went for law and made that switch.
Yes, ma'am. Many people in our batch can relate to this because many people are from science background. So I think you were an inspiration to these students. Ma'am, the second question is, what were your law school years like? And how did you make the best of your time in law school?
I think law school years were a blur. I don't know whether I made the most of them, but I always felt that there is less time because there is so much to do, certainly. So I think typically I would define my law school years, and all 3 years, I don't give exceptions to even weekends, would be something like staying up till 2, 3 a.m., finishing with the readings. And that's not just doing something extra additional. You do your bare minimum and then rush to class in the morning, finish your classes, come back, then sit with the readings. and in whatever brief moments that you get, you try to do whatever you like. Whether I wanted to play, I used to play volleyball, I used to play football in law school, so I participated in that. But yeah, primarily it was about catching up. However, I didn't felt it to be very overbearing, because I actually enjoyed what I was reading. So, I mean, it's important that you're passionate about what you're doing. There might be 10 subjects thrown at you. You can pick your five and be passionate about it, but then you do them well. So it can become a lot if you're not interested. It's okay, and in fact, good to go through that phase if you actually want to do that.
Yes, ma'am. To this question also many students can relate, as right now also we have many readings and we have our exams approaching, like on Monday we have our exams. We can really relate to this. Ma'am, the third question is that did you participate in any moot court competitions and were they helpful to you in your career?
Yeah, I did NLS arbitration. So I think I did it in my second year, third semester, I think, and that's till that time I had not done arbitration. That moot was life changing for me because it was through that moot that I understood two things. One is I have an inclination towards arbitration. I really like that subject area, and because of that moot, I realized that I want to take that up as a practice area. Second was I understand that you know law and subjects better when you do them yourself as opposed to being taught. And I don't mean that professors or teachers are redundant. It's just that at a level where you're studying law, you shouldn't law subjects as typical subjects of your high school, where you would be given lectures on this is so and so section, this is the law, and this is the procedure that you have to follow. What you look at any subject is what you understand, and then discuss ideas with the professor rather than being taught. There is a difference in critical discussion, and that's what you should have in your classrooms as opposed to teaching. Because that's one distinguishing factor that I realized through my moot. When I did the course from scratch myself, my approach of learning the subject and the problem helped me clear my concepts much more than any teaching method could have. So I think, yeah, as many moots is a very good idea.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, I was reading in a CV that you went for a semester exchange program to Cornell Law School. So, how was the experience? And were there any differences between the teaching that happens in India and in USA?
Um, so it was a great experience, culturally speaking. Um, I think more than what you learn at an exchange program, it's about interacting with people from different cultures and understanding how they go about their lives as well, both professional and personal. Um, Semester exchange would add to your life experience more to your legal education. So, I mean, for me, it wasn't like I got to study these three, four, five subjects. I could have studied them myself, as I said. Uh, for me, it was more about interacting with people there. It was about understanding how law school is, say, at Cornell. In terms of teaching method, I would say I would still give credit to my law school. I still maintain that I think it was better than Cornell because I found it easier. I think Indians are used to studying more, working harder. I think in terms of, we can do much more in less time. I felt it in Cornell that I was doing much less in more time. So academically, it was easy. What is difficult is to survive in terms of, whether it's meeting new people, making it on your own. Like you are a student, you go on limited budget, so you're working part time, trying to make ends meet. And that's an experience which I think is much more important than sitting in the classrooms and learning, because eventually it's life and you're living life. So in terms of a life experience, I would say it was great. Yeah.
And ma'am, according to you, which is a better teaching method, like the USA or in India?
I I I think that line has been blurred now. We have some very good law schools. I don't know what was there before, but in terms of engineering, higher education, when I studied, I didn't attend classes. Like, I was never a good student. I think I would have attended 1 or 2 classes in my 4 years. I just studied myself because I felt it was just not a good system. I felt so in that context, Indian legal education, I would say, is not great in some spaces because they just don't take it seriously. They don't take the subject seriously. Even the colleges, a lot of them. But law school, and I think there are many, they have shifted that, shifted that balance where I think we are at parity with education systems abroad, but it would still depend on professor to professor. It's not something that I would say is uniform across a college. Even if a college, say like a top tier national law school, I can find a better course at some other college. It's up to the professor. It's the teaching methodology in Cornell was largely, as I said, uh, the role of a professor was to profess and to invoke you to think critically on what you're studying, as opposed to telling you, okay, this is the law. And that I felt is a much better approach. And I see even in my law school, this approach being followed throughout. So yeah, and I am in favor of Indian education because despite whatever we do in terms of maintaining standards, I think we work much more harder and consume much more.
Thank you, ma'am. This gives a lot of insight to us about the different versions of studying, and it also tells us that how Indian education has kept up with the foreign education. So, ma'am, I would like to ask that how were your initial years post law school? Like, did you work in any law firms or what did you do?
I was placed in Shardul Merchant right after my college. It was a campus placement. So I think I had a break of 1 or 2 months after my graduation, and then I joined the Delhi office of Shardul Merchant, and I've been working there since. So initial years, I would say, I mean, typically what you would expect. It would be like 3, 4 a.m.s at night, coming back in the morning, sleeping for 1 or 2 hours, then waking up to call saying you're supposed to do something, finishing your task, going back, sometimes staying 48 hours in the firm. It's all initial years of any profession or career that you take are much more harder than I think post 3 year period. It becomes okay. But whenever you join any profession, and especially law firms, you're in that space where you need to find a space for yourself. And you know, to build that image, what kind of a lawyer are you? Are you a hardworking lawyer? Are you a smart lawyer or whatsoever? So for you to do that and to settle and make space, it takes longer. So the longer hours that you put in your initial years, I think the lesser hard work there is to do subsequently. Uh, but if you've done the same exercise in your law school, it's not as hard, and then it becomes a matter of practice. I mean, I can very confidently say, despite working in one of the top tier law firms for such a long time, I have not felt as much pressure as I felt as a law student, because my college was able to push me so much that this seems easier. So I think if you are to become a lawyer, you should be ready and accept the fact that you need to work hard constantly all your life. And the earlier you start, the lesser you have to do later on.
Thank you, ma'am. And ma'am, did you always want to work in a law firm or were your aims different like in law school?
I didn't have any particular aims in law school. I don't approach in general life with these specific goals or where I want to work. Uh, till I gave my interview at Amarchand, I did not know whether I want to join a firm. I did not know whether I wanted to be a litigator or a corporate lawyer. And that was my third year when mostly people are deciding on what they want to do, whether they want to join judiciary, join an individual counsel or whatever. Uh, to me, these things happen very automatically. However, they happened because I was prepared when they came along. Uh, so I wouldn't say that I always wanted to. I'm still not sure if I always want to be in a law firm because this career is so dynamic. It's very, and there is so much to do. It's very difficult to be satisfied in one form of a profile for a very long time. So even if I know people who always wanted to be corporate lawyers or litigators, I see now that at this point after 4 or 5 years, they are planning to switch, and that's what happens. So I don't believe in rigidity of goals. You should enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy, then you're going to suffer throughout your career because it requires hard work. If you enjoy what you're doing, you will eventually end up wherever you want to be, and that place also will change with time. So you need to be dynamic in terms of your career choices in law, I think.
Thank you, ma'am. Your story really tells us that we can't achieve all goals and we may achieve anything that is possible. So, ma'am, the next question is that it is interesting to know that you had the opportunity to intern with national as well as international law firms. So, how was the experience in these two work opportunities?
Mm, uh, the similar to an exchange program, one I would say the cultural differences and cultural differences in workplace are very significant. uh, you are as an intern maybe not required to be so professional at a national law firm, but being an intern at an international law firm requires you to behave as if you are 3 years into the profession, in terms of not knowing things, but in terms of being, professional about things. Come on time, be well dressed, the manner in which you speak. It should not reflect as if you're in. I mean, you are an intern, but it's not like because typically what happens in that I've seen when interns come at law firms, national law firms, the kind of work that they're given, and you would also see it's just research. You would rarely find an intern doing any drafting. And uh, this I felt was like even in my internships, I never did any drafting, or I never really knew what's going on in a transaction if I'm participating in it. Somebody has called me, given me some random task that I want this. I want to know what are the interim reliefs under the Arbitration Act. Without head or tail of the matter, I am just frantically, looking on Google, Manupatra, everywhere, what are interim reliefs, without knowing why that associate wants that information, without knowing what is the matter. Is it something ongoing? Is it just general research? What is the purpose? So interns in India are sent on a wild goose chase at law firms, is what I think. Uh, as opposed to my experience in Whiting case, I found it very structured, where it was just 1 month, and I worked on one transaction. And by the end of the month, I actually knew what is going on in the entire transaction from point A to point Z. So I think the level they treat you as equal, one. So they expect you to behave as if you are equal, which requires a lot of effort. So in terms of professionalism, there's a difference.
So, ma'am, in our law school in the first years, many students face many insecurities. So, as you have been working in law firms, so could you please share with us a few things that you wish you had known about the practice of law when you were in law school?
Um, if I had known, I think I would say importance of networking. Um See, whatever you study in law school, a lot of people say whatever you study is not useful. Legal practice is entirely different. I completely disagree with that. I don't think. I mean, if you are to say that, I would really you question what you're being taught, because to me, right now, whatever I do, I actually sometimes think, oh, this is something that I studied. I wish I had my notes, and I think that often. I think I therefore wouldn't say that in terms of academics or profession or I would like to know something. I think whatever I've done is fine, and there's nothing to be insecure of. Even if you don't know things, you learn on the job. Uh, uh, so whatever you are being taught or whatever your subjects are, you know them well. You know the concepts well. As long as you know the concepts well, you'll be able to figure it out. Because being a practicing lawyer is not about knowing the law. It's about having the ability to figure out what the law is. So if you are prepared enough, if your concepts are clear enough, and by concepts I mean, say for instance, if it's a random query shot by a client that so and so has happened and I want a relief, you should be able to think at a broader level. This is an individual claiming for some form of relief. What are the areas in which what are the areas from which it can come from? If your concepts are clear, you would know, okay, this can be something relating. If it's a contract, it will be a contractual matter. If not, it will be a tort matter. If nothing else is there, you can, and given the facts, it can be criminal. So on a conceptual basis, if you're able to identify these 4 or 5 buckets, you're fine. Then you will have the ability to identify and figure out what you should do with the matter. So just get your concepts straight. Don't fixate too much on knowing what the legal position is, because it is as if now it's not going to remain the same. Work on your concepts. That should be okay. The second thing would be networking, and it's something that I was aware of, but it's something that I am still not very comfortable doing. I don't like the idea of randomly interacting with people with a vested interest. So, and it's very uncomfortable. People say network, but it's not very easy to do that. Uh, so I think a better approach to networking could be, explained to law students as well, where you're networking, but you're not networking because in future this person is going to give me a job. You're networking because you understand that as a legal community, we are a very well knitted community. Knowing people and knowing what they do is good for them as much as it is good for you. So I think that aspect law school is pretty much shielded from, which should be brought in.
Thank you, ma'am. This really helped us. And ma'am, as now we know that the moot you participated in helped you in developing an interest in arbitration. But ma'am, can you shed some light on developing technological innovations for alternate dispute resolution and why are they important?
So as I said, that moot developed that interest area for me in arbitration. Now, when I say that I have developed an interest in arbitration, I don't mean the law. I mean, there is a limit up to which you can do in law. Uh, I mean, generally, the concept of alternative dispute resolution is what I find fascinating. I think it is something which is only going to increase over the course of years, and increase in a way in which you are prepared. But with technological innovation, we see a lot of automation. Like right now, because of COVID, we see virtual hearings being conducted. Now, whatever it might mean for court proceedings, for arbitration, it has a significant impact, because I think it reduces the cost of arbitration by at least a half. At least, I would say more. Because a lot of time and resources are spent by lawyers traveling and making schedules and staying at hotels, booking conference rooms, etc., to participate. So I think this entire phase has brought down the cost of arbitration, and it's only going to increase as more technological innovations are going to appear, say in the form of smart contracts. So right now you do have contracts where you write in plain English or whatever language the agreement of parties, You also have this version coming up of smart contracts where actually contracts are written in the form of codes and not self-executing contracts. So if you are to have that, and if you are to have disputes pertaining to such smart contracts, uh, I don't see. I mean, I see at some point lawyers also becoming redundant because it will be done by AI, but also uh, even in terms of how lawyers participate in it will change, because they will now I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with blockchain, but smart contract arbitration happens on blockchain. It's already being done. It's not something which is far in the future. So how these contract work is they have a defined set of parameters in which they execute themselves. For instance, if it's a shipping contract, uh, if a seller from US ships certain goods to India, the buyer is in India, the buyer and seller have an agreement in the form of a code, a smart contract. So when the seller from US ships the goods, they will obviously send some form of documentation, such as bill of lading and such other things, to the buyer in India. The buyer in India will take that document typically and present it to the relevant authorities at the port and collect those goods. Now, in a smart contract scenario, this would happen where the seller would ship the goods, the buyer would get the documents and feed them into a system which automatically implements the contract and allows them to retrieve the goods. So if arbitration or disputes were to arise in such scenarios, and these are all timeline based events, they would be, I think, dealt in on a blockchain where uh, you know, uh, and it's already happening that arbitrators are appointed where arbitrators are actually software developers and not really judges or anybody related to law. So because they understand code better, they would know what is to be executed, what not. I'm sure legal issues will also arise where lawyers will always find a space for themselves. But I think the future is headed that way, and it's going to make uh, ADR much more efficient.
Thank you, ma'am. This really shows that how we need to change with time and also how the system needs to change over time. Ma'am, as you told us in the beginning that in your initial law school years, you had a lot on your plate, like you were very busy. And when you were working in the law firm, then also you were very busy. So I request you to tell you, how do you balance your work life with your personal interest?
Uh, I don't think I've been able to do that, so I can't really say. But all I can say is that, see, it depends. If you enjoy what you do, you don't really. So most of the people that I also work with, for them, when they're practicing law, it's something that they're living. They want to do this. That's why I said that it's very important that you like what you do. If you don't like that, then it's going to get difficult, because work-life balance also comes from the fact that if I'm working on a matter, I might not feel like I'm working. It might be as good as a hobby for me. So of course that's there, but yeah, you need to find time. Like I know I had very less time in school. I did the 3-year course, so it was more concentrated than the 5 years. So probably because of that also. But I think you need to identify 2-3 things that you want, and so you do your courses, your subjects very well. You do all your readings, not for the professor, but I mean, if you're attending a lecture, uh, it's your time which is being invested. I wouldn't want to waste my time, hearing things which I don't understand. I better be prepared and improve my knowledge by throwing questions at the professor. That's what they are there for, not to teach you. I don't take it like that. So I think prepare your subjects well, enjoy them. Once you do that, whatever little space that you have, you will know what 2-3 other things that you want to do. For me, that one was mooting, the other was playing. So I always made sure that I took some time out, be it even 1 hour in 1 month, but still make that time out to do that activity. Same for I think work always has its phases. Sometimes it allows you more time, sometimes it doesn't, and you can't really help it. But yeah, you whatever space you find, since you are working so much, you automatically then end up doing things which give you comfort. So I mean, I don't know how much planning works, but for me, that also sort of is an automatic process.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Uh, So, ma'am, my last question is that did you manage to pursue your hobbies during law school? Like you said
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
were
like I said,
playing volleyball and all this. So, were you able to pursue them?
I played volleyball. I also participated in a tournament. I think I went to in NUJS, I think, for a volleyball tournament. For me, exchange was extracurricular. I would say that, not academic. Um then I did my moot. I didn't get into debating because I didn't really have the time. So it's not. I mean, don't you shouldn't overburden yourself that people are doing so much. I should do this. I should do that. It really doesn't matter. uh, at the end of the day, it comes down to how well you do your subjects, and whatever time you have, you just do what you like as opposed to what should be there in your CV. That's it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, now we'll continue with the Q&A session with the participant. So, I request the participant to post question in the chat box.
I think we have Aryaman Dubey, who is asking you to, elaborate on the concept of blockchain. He's saying blockchain is the technology of cryptocurrency, but block is data, collection of data is blockchain. So I think
Thank you to explain the concept. Yeah,
it's
it's
not
very
clear,
right.
so he's asking for a little bit of clarification.
Blockchain would be, and I don't know if I'm the right person to explain this, but blockchain system of collected ledgers, and it's essentially, as you said, storing data. But if I were to, save some data on a particular server, or if in any, say, banking channels, how the transactions happen is that one person is in control of, verifying and storing and collecting of data. How it works in blockchain is it's a sort of a shared ledger where part, no, there is no central control of data with any one authority. Therefore, you see so much resistance from the government in issuing circulars banning it. And overall, there is generally a resistance because there's no one in control of that ledger, or how that ledger is verified. It's distributed in the sense that there might be several players, who I would call miners, who would be able to verify whatever changes that you make in your data, and make money out of it. And this ensures, and they do it like, if so it's not one person. There'll be, for example, in an ecosystem, you say that there are 5 miners. Whatever changes that I make to the data stored in that ecosystem, all the 5 miners will verify. Whoever is the first to verify will be rewarded with a Bitcoin or part of it. And that's how they make money. And in result, I get my data being stored in the most updated format. And in that sense, it's said that it's less susceptible to hacking also, although I'm not sure how much. But yeah, essentially you're sharing data over some cloud, and nobody has control over it, and it's sort of uh, having no central authority to manage the data, store the data, or verify the data. So even like I said, in smart contracts, eventually what you're storing anywhere, even in contracts, the events that are happening are data. So they would form some part of the blockchain that on X date so happened, on Y date so happened, and the parties can't change that. So in terms of evidentiary value, you would also have to see how that plays up under the Evidence Act. But parties can't change that. So there is information already there in the blockchain. There is a dispute which has arisen. Now you analyze, whosoever does that analysis, a software developer or a judge, based on that, those blockchain events as to what will be the result of those disputes. So one application is smart contracts, and one application, of course, is cryptocurrency. There are various applications to blockchain technology. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Nimra, for that. Also, there is another question from Ms. Tasneem Hussain. She's asking, ma'am, 4-5 years from now, what is the scope of a career in arbitration?
I think exceptional. I think if you want to earn a lot of money, and if you want to do it in a very fancy manner, you don't want to drag yourself to court, sweating, carrying bags. You should do arbitration. You just go to nice hotels, sit in air-conditioned rooms. So yeah, and it's only growing. I think it's a very, it might seem like, laughable, but it's a very fair point. Not everybody can rush with 20 kgs of bags dragging, and it's really hot in Delhi. So I've seen people faint, and you're a junior, you're the one who will be doing all the dragging. So it's any sort of field is a life choice. Do you see yourself in court? Do you fancy courts more than you fancy arbitration? If some people are of that setup, that they want those court formal settings. So for them, maybe arbitration is not the way. But yeah, if I think you want to do commercial disputes, you can't avoid arbitration. And yeah, in career and arbitration, it's, I think, the most lucrative out of all the spaces. I would pick two fields right now. One is company law matters, insolvency, and one is arbitration, which is going to increase significantly. Arbitration more because there is a lot happening, not just arbitration. It's the entire ADR framework. It's mediation, negotiation, conciliation. There are a lot of things in that space which are not utilized and which are going to, and the utility of which is going to increase significantly over the course of time. The other thing is arbitration gives you the benefit to practice in various jurisdictions, which litigation doesn't. If I'm a lawyer qualified in India, I don't have a license to practice in UK, but I can go do arbitrations in UK. That kind of leverage is also there. So yeah, for commercial disputes, I think arbitration is something that everybody should focus on.
Great. Also, there is another question from Gaurav Gupta. As a young law student, I would like to know the qualities that are required of a law intern, and how can I develop such skills as internship provides us on-field experience?
Qualities of an intern. See, like I said, I don't know. So I've done internships, and I've seen people, say internships are very critical for you, and the more you do, the better. All that is true, depending on where you intern and who you intern with. If you go intern in a team of 10 people, and you're working with, say, the junior most lawyer, that lawyer is just dumping work on you to reduce their work. They're giving you research work, you'll do it, they'll put in their work, your work as theirs, they'll present it. You are not really known to anybody else. In that event, no matter how hard you work, sometimes it's a futile exercise. On the other hand, you can be interning at a team in which you really get involved in the matter and do your bit as an individual, as opposed to an intern working for somebody or filling in their work. If you're able to achieve that, that's only when your internship, to me, is going to make a mark. And that really depends on, of course, you and how much hard work. Hard work is imperative. How much hard work you give. But it also depends on the team. So pick your internships carefully in that sense also. It's not necessary that you intern at a very good fancy place. It's important that when you intern, you actually get to do something. So skills, I think if somebody were to come and intern with me, I would expect nothing of them. I wouldn't expect any law student to have any drafting skills. Yeah, one thing I would expect is for them to do some research. So I think research skills are very important. Uh, Now, how do you go about developing them? Um, People generally say that, don't look at Google, check Manupatra SCC, read articles. I disagree with that. I think that if there's a short way to do it, you should do it, because it's as simple as standing on the shoulder of giants. If you Google any issue, you will find an article from some very good lawyer or law firm on that subject. You start from there. Always Google. Any subject matter that you put in right now, you'll get a brilliant article. So many firms now publish articles, lawyers publish articles. That can be a starting point where you understand. Once you do that, then you go into what kind of cases are they referring to, open up, read those cases, and then do an individual research. Because as an intern, you have less time. You can't really take a day. Some law is thrown at you. It's very new to you. You don't know. So obviously you can't be expected to open a book. You are expected, but you shouldn't be opening a book and trying to understand that. Go for the shortest method first, because it's eventually about the product that you give. But yeah, make sure that you are able to back up that product eventually with, case law or some other authority. So yeah, research skills you should definitely develop, because that is something that is definitely coming to you. But apart from that, I don't think it's correct to expect of interns to have any such skills. You develop skills when you work. You don't develop. As law students, we write research papers. Uh, Sometimes we don't see a point in it, but I think that's a very good exercise, because forget about internships. Don't think of it in these small bits. How do I succeed as an intern? It's You can do the best job, but you might not get a job at a firm. There are a lot of contingencies involved in surrounding, a career or work or employment. So, I mean, I think for me, my internships didn't really help me in securing a job, to be honest. I never really myself was able to make that connection, where I'm working matter as opposed to, assisting somebody in doing their job. And it's very difficult to get there. But yeah, one way to, there's a method to it. If you want to say, have a job at a particular law firm, you keep interning with them. You intern with them in your last, if you're a 5-year student, I say so, you intern with them for 4 times. Your 4th year, you intern with them. Your 5th year, you intern with them. It's not just about quality. Quality is imperative. Hard work is imperative, but also about how much face value you're able to develop. And it's very difficult to have that in a month. So I think doing internships, at least 2 days that you want a job at, is a good idea. But aside from that, for me, value of internships is not as much, I would say.
Okay, all right. That's Nimra's perspective on internships. Maybe it's not like, please.
A lot of people disagree. For me, it's not just about results. For me, intern is coming at me, I really don't think they can do anything to impress me. And they shouldn't. They are there to learn, not to show how they can. It's just a different perspective. I don't see interns as, some people who would come show off some skills and I'll offer them a job. That happens automatically if you're good at it. You don't need to impress people. It really does happen. It happened with me, randomly happened. So if you know your things, you'll be fine. But yeah, know your things.
Exactly. Thanks for that, Nimra. Also, Aryaman is asking, is it possible for me to learn law in India and practice in the US? I think you have to, maybe Nimra is the best person to answer this.
Yeah, it all depends from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There are obviously certain conditions attached to it. If I'm not wrong, I think if you have all the requirement in US, so it varies from state to state. Every state has a different requirement. Primarily, students from India either go for the California bar or the New York bar. I think there is a requirement that even if you studied in India, if you studied X number of hours in US, then you'll be eligible to give their bar exam. Those hours may come from masters. Masters, if you, of course, you can. Uh, it may, I think, also come from exchange programs. I'm not sure about this, but I think if you have a certain number of hours, you can still appear. So, but yeah, definitely masters, if you do, you can. And that is actually a very good question, which law students should be open to practicing in different jurisdictions and preparing for them while you're at law school. Uh, so there are some jurisdictions such as UK, Canada, US, at least three, I would say, which uh, you can look at right now. If you're in a 5-year course, look at it when you're in your third year. Just understand what the requirements are and apply for the best way to understand also is apply for these summer programs that international law firms have, vacation schemes, sorry. Yeah. So vacation schemes, all Magic Circle law firms and all international law firms offer. They offer it to Indian students as well. And actually, I think if you go for a vacation scheme, it's covered by the firm. So, I mean, firms like White and Case, Allen and Overy, for sure, I know, do these vacation schemes for Indian students. So, start applying there. That's how you would, explore the workspace in that jurisdiction also and understand this jurisdiction is an alternative option. You can practice in India and simultaneously have also a license in some other jurisdiction. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nimra. We will just take one last question because we are already running short of time. So Mihika Mukherjee is asking, what changes did you see in yourself as you went through law school? Was there a stark difference in your personality?
Yeah, I think I became more responsible. I didn't do a 5-year course. I'm not, when I'm joining law school, I'm not really a kid out of school, trying to enjoy college. I've done that in my engineering. I wasted a lot of time in my engineering. So I came with that background where I knew that, fun time is over. Life is very real and I need to take responsibility in what I do. So I took my law school very responsibly. I would say. Some would say much more responsibly than I should have, but I really did that. And since then, since I've been practicing, I don't see any difference. It's just that I think law school is a time where you're the sharpest and you're the smartest as you can get. You're not going to get smarter once you start practicing. I can really feel my brain deteriorating with time as I practice, because when you practice, you are always constrained with deadlines, with tasks that you have to reach X. You're not really thinking with a free mind. You, somewhere along the way, lose your creative thinking. So yeah, personally, change is that I think I'm becoming dumber as I practice. Certainly, I was much more smarter in law school. So that's why I'm saying that if you have to peak, you'll peak in law school in terms of your thinking. So you can either maintain that or go down. So peak in your law school as much as you can, because it's very difficult to have that sort of creative, vigor later on in your career. It doesn't happen. It doesn't. Your workspace doesn't. The environment in which you work doesn't allow you, because you are always constrained to reach point X. You're not free that this is the proposition, what can you do? That doesn't happen. You always have an end result and you just need to figure out the way to achieve it. So I think you lose your creativity with your mind. So it's difficult to keep that up. So I think law school is the time that you should really go wild with your subjects, which you don't get to do.
Great. Okay, so it's already past the time and we are running short of time. So we'll end the session here. Thank you, Nimra, so much for joining us today amidst your busy schedule. We know how busy lawyers are these days. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very, very sure that students have learned a lot from this interaction. I hope they can connect with you, on a personal level.